So of course, our trip begins where most trips begin, with the first step. And in this case, it is the first flight. We started out with a 7-hour flight from Newark, New Jersey to Frankfurt, Germany, where we then caught another flight out of Frankfurt to Athens, Greece, which was like another 2-hour flight. We left around nighttime, maybe 6 in the afternoon, I want to say, and we ended up landing at 11 in the morning. So we kind of time traveled forward in time. A little bit of jet lag, but honestly, I really didn't get jet lag too much. I guess I'm kind of used to that kind of stuff. So it's whatever. I would say probably my favorite part of the flight was the fact that we could all play trivia in the same lobby with everyone on the plane if they were playing. And I was basically helping beat half the plane's butt in trivia questions. Of course, a flight and a half later, we end up in Greece and driving out of Athens Airport to our hotel in Greater Athens. So, yeah, just honestly an overwhelming sight off the bat at all these beautiful mountains. I gotta make a quality vlog about this somehow. Wow, the landscape is actually really sick. It's actually kind of interesting. You can see a lot of east meets west here. Parts of it look like Afghanistan, but with a lot more green, obviously. You can even see how some of the cityscape kind of can look like places such as Kabul or maybe another Middle Eastern city you can think of. But as you can see here, the city is absolutely massive. Even if that's just one side of it, a majority of Greece's entire population lives in Athens.
Maybe that's a better one? Yeah, okay. So my name is Dimitris and we're gonna go to the Ancient Acropolis Hotel, which is about 25 minutes from here. The weather today is pretty sunny, it's gonna be really hot. It has been influenced by its location because of the being at the junction between the east and the west makes it a really important place.
Hard to hear what he's saying, but he's talking about the whole east meets west thing going on.
Actually, the Greeks, we are really proud of our culture and we speak of our country with intense passion because we have a really rich history. Actually, Greece has a history from 7 to 13th millennia BC. So it's really its history as well, mixed culture as well, and nowadays with people from other places. It's actually the same word, sympathy from sympathia. And the most important thing that you need to know is how to say thank you in Greek. A small Greek lesson. About the religion, in Greece you're gonna find some...
So here we have kind of the main area heading towards the Acropolis in Athens. And you can see it's a very nice city, it's a very big city, so I'm sure there's parts of it that may not be so nice, but you can see the very east meets west kind of look going on here. Somewhat of a modern city with some Middle Eastern looking architecture as well. You also get a lot of graffiti in these cities, and I will touch more on that later because it seems like a bit of a politically complicated thing going on. But also, as Christianity being one of their main religions, you have all these churches, and these are Byzantine churches from the Byzantine Empire, and they are absolutely gorgeous. You can see people living in these apartments have little balcony gardens, just gorgeous, honestly. I really like how modern Greece is kind of just living alongside ancient Greece, too. And I said they were Christian before, but they're actually Orthodox Christian is like the proper term for it, I suppose. They all drive left-wheel drive, just like in America. They drive on the left side, right side of the road, just like we do in America. Only difference is maybe a lot of the streets are a lot narrower and windy than anything you'd see in America. They also all drive stick shift. It's more common to see Mercedes and BMW than Jeep and Ford because here it's cheaper because it's not an import.
Yo, this is like some expert driving, dude. Like, there's no way, dude. I couldn't do it.
You have to have it here. It's like a bus license.
Oh my god, dude.
We stayed in different hotels every night except for the occasional 2-night stay, and they varied. Some were nice, some were not as nice.
And the miraculous view is, oh, a balcony? Oh, okay. Oh, what the you do? You climbing over here, you crackhead?
There's another one.
Dude, what? Yeah, what is that? Are you familiar with this mechanism here? So we have a balcony. All right.
So we were there during the hottest heat wave Greece has had since the 80s, and half the country was being lit on fire.
It's 104 degrees right now. Crisp. Crisp. See this? So it doesn't really want to close, so I literally have to do this. Got like this friggin'. What the hell's the point of that? There's no other half of it. We just pull that if there's an emergency and shit, alright. You know, little whack. Got this little thing, bro.
Hello? We went out to eat that night, and I had an amazing chicken souvlaki. And actually, no, it was beef. I think it was beef kebab, actually. And lemon, tomato, onion, rice, all that stuff. Just, it was so good. And then like the pita bread under the bottom. After you finish the meal, I finished off with the pita bread, and it was just marinated and soaked with all like the spices and juices of what was sitting on top of it. Amazing. Unfortunately, the next morning, the fires around the country got worse, and closer to Athens specifically. They were huge forest fires everywhere. Intense heat wave, hottest it's been since the 80s. It's like 110 sometimes. Humid, sometimes not humid. It was also very, very dry, and that's why the fires were a problem. And people were setting these fires as well. And basically the talk around the country from the locals were saying that the government was behind it, because there's a law in Greece where you can't build anything on forest land. There's forest protections, you know?
On this side of the road, 2 priests are trying to save their monastery, and then come with me right here. You've got a single house. Apparently there's 1 person inside. These are all volunteers. There are no firefighters here.
And to the north, flames threatening ancient Olympia. This farmer says when you violently disrespect the earth, it punishes you. 1 firefighter has died, and crews from at least 10 other nations on the way to help, despite the scorching triple-digit temperatures. With more than 100 fires burning across the country over the last 24 hours, one city official calling it a biblical catastrophe. And it's not over yet. Molly Hunter, NBC News, Krioneri, Greece.
But, of course, if the forest burns down, well, there's a loophole. Now you can build on it. And they said that the government wanted to build wind turbines so they can make more money and stuff like that. And they already caught like 3 people who were setting the fires. One was like a refugee from somewhere, and the other were two natives to the country, and just very sketchy. The government was very angry, and our bus driver, George, that fires were getting very close to his house, so he was becoming very emotional. But I would like to put some closure. His family's fine, his house is fine. They did stop the fires before they reached his house, and he was very thankful that I asked to make sure he was okay. Anyway, so here's the next morning.
I don't know if you can tell, but there are huge wildfires going on in Greece right now. Excuse me, just woke up, my voice is a little raspy. But the smoke in the air is definitely a lot denser and thicker. And we can actually smell it as well, a lot stronger, and it's also kind of burning our eyes to like the littlest bit, as if we're sitting around a campfire. So the fires are definitely a lot closer to Athens this morning.
One of the most dangerous wildfires of the season so far. It took 500 first responders working around the clock and countless aerial sorties to bring this blaze just north of the Greek capital under control. Volunteers working alongside police and fire rescue teams managed to keep the flames from spreading to more populated areas of Athens. As night fell, helicopters and planes stopped their water drops, and ground crews took over the task of keeping the flames at bay. At daybreak, roads reopened to reveal the scale of devastation. dozens of homes and businesses completely destroyed. After an announcement that fires north of Athens had been put out, the blaze was back and bigger than before.
So on happier topics, this hotel we stayed at, the Athens Acropolis, had ancient ruins in its basement that it was built on top of. And it is the Themistocles Wall, Athens' outer wall that used to defend it against the Spartan sieges. So here is where I'm going to start integrating our little side-by-side visualization stuff. So here's the Assassin's Creed Odyssey Discovery Tour, right? And here is Athens, where I'm staying right now at the current place and time of the video. Here's the wall, right? And the wall that is under the hotel is basically part of the wall that defended them from the Spartan onslaught, as you can see. So yeah, that's that big wall. Goes all the way around the city, as you can see. See, big old wall. Our hotel was probably, I want to say our hotel was somewhere around here. So this length of the wall is what we're talking about there. So here at the Acropolis Museum now, we have the ruins of kind of a small downtown Roman area, right? So there might be some Greek in here, but it's mostly Roman. You can tell because the Roman architecture is small, kind of red brick looking stuff, where the Greeks used giant bricks and pillars and stuff like that. Romans built on top of it. Also very advanced. That right there is plumbing, like sewer tunnels, because the Romans had indoor plumbing in their houses and stores. Very advanced for their time, to be honest. This museum was also a fan of jump scares. As I'd be minding my own business, I would be surprisingly confronted by a couple 100-foot drop out of nowhere through a see-through floor, and I promise you that gave me quite the wake-up adrenaline. Yeah, scared the crap out of me. So here's some little diagrams of the construction of the Acropolis. That's it when it was at its peak, finished construction. This one right here is how it stands today, what it looks like right now. That was it at its peak. Over here, you see we start going back in time to its construction. You know, Romans adding little things, little castles here and there. The main construction of the original Greek buildings right here. And the Parthenon still being built, as you can see on the right. And then you come over to basically, like, I guess the default map seed right here, where it's just the wall and the plateau.
A misunderstanding. Acropolis, Parthenon, which is what? Acropolis, when we say the word Acropolis, that's a Greek word, we refer to the whole rock, right? Acropolis. You know that these two Greek words, we use them. Acro, you say acrobat in English. You say acrophobia, right? Acro means the highest point.
It's like a fear of acrobatics.
Polis, you say political, politics, right? Polis means city. Acro and polis, Acropolis, means the highest point of the city. From the early, the Olympia.
And this is what is left.
5,000, 6,000 the Acropolis was monarchy ceases to exist, and the power was given to more than one rulers. It was given to the aristocracy. So no more king, but more slowly Athens becomes this amazing city, especially after the Persian Wars. Don't forget.
So here's where we get into the pottery stuff. Black figure painting, red figure painting, all has to do with the color of the clay.
The Kerameikos was a large, sprawling area northwest of Athens Acropolis. While part of it was used as a graveyard, it was also dedicated to the creation of pottery. The Kerameikos was so significant to the art form that its name lives on in the word ceramics. Perhaps drawn by the river, potters moved into the area and formed their own bustling community. It's believed that by the end of the 5th century BCE, hundreds of thousands of pottery vessels had been made in Athens, including everything from heavy, undecorated cooking pots to delicate and beautiful containers reserved for the most precious oils. Sadly, only around 1% of these works survive today, some only in small fragments. Raw clay from a river was hardly fit for a potter's wheel. Athenian potters used clay that was rich in iron, which created the distinctive orange-red coloring seen in Athenian pottery. But this high-quality clay needed to be handled carefully to avoid disasters in the kiln later on. The clay was first brought to settling beds, where it was mixed with water to wash out any organic debris like leaves. Once it was purified, workers kneaded the clay with their hands to push out air bubbles and create the texture necessary for a flawless finish. One of the goals of these early steps was to remove any impurities that could destroy a delicate design, or worse, render a vase unusable. Once the clay was cleaned, it was up to the potter to shape it into a vase by spinning it on a wheel or pressing it into a mold. Their choice depended on what shape they wanted for the vase, but they also considered the possible scope of its decoration. Potters did not work alone. A workshop might have had many people working together on different aspects of production. Potters collaborated with many different painters for decorating their creations. Some of these painters even became potters themselves. All in all, a single vase could be worked on by many different artists, with each one focusing on a different aspect of its design. After the pots were shaped and decorated, they were packed into kilns for the lengthy and delicate firing process. The process had 3 stages: oxidation, reduction, and reoxidation. The main purpose of the firing process was to carefully manage the clay's exposure to oxygen. The chemical reactions caused by firing gave the pots their distinctive orange-red coloring. This also turned the designs made from the clay decoration slips glossy and black. The most difficult part of the firing process was managing the fires themselves. It required an enormous amount of skill and experience to properly judge the exact temperatures needed, and even the smallest mistake could ruin several hours of work. Vases could be decorated in all sorts of ways. Before 530 BCE, Athenian vases were decorated using the black figure technique, where figures and designs were painted as dark silhouettes. At the end of the 6th century BCE, painters created a new technique called red figure, an inversion of the painting process that left the figures in red and the background in black. This gave the artist more freedom to better explore details like muscles and individual locks of hair. Designs were sketched onto the bare surface of the pot using a thin, sharp tool. Thin relief lines, which helped define subtle elements like facial features, were added using a brush made of a few stiff hairs. More elaborate vases were sometimes gilded, but these decorations were so delicate, they were most likely only added after the firing process.
A condition, a situation. They told a story about a historical event like the first.
So most of these art depictions, their main purpose was to tell a story. It was a good way to document events that happened, like wedding pictures, stuff like that. That's what they did.
I know difficult name, impossible to learn it or remember it, but this is.
You can really admire some of the detailing of these sculptures as well, with the technology they had back then. Really impressive.
With what? This is not something real. I mean, he's not fighting with another man, right? So this is not a puppet scene. We have a person, we have a man, we have him on the side, not to stay wrong, not to be wrong. Erethio. That was a temple dedicated to goddess Athena.
More British people slander, as the British were known to steal a lot of artifacts and statues and relics from a lot of these ruined sites. Like, one guy stole a bunch of stuff from the Acropolis, and he had the permission to stay there because he said he was painting the ruins, and over 10 years stole all their stuff, put it in British museums. And this museum actually highlights the areas where they're missing stuff to let you know, yeah, England stole that from us, go figure, classic England. So here we are walking up to the Parthenon. These are Roman arches, you see, because Romans were the only ones that made arches. Greeks did not make arches.
Okay, open
So this would have been a Roman theater, and people still use it. As you see those modern lights there, some people have the privilege of still doing plays and stuff in it today. They still have the occasional... It's actually a recreation, to be honest. She said that a lot of that is, like, refurbished.
Nika comes from the Greek. You did? We will. Ah, you will, when you get back. Pnika comes from... The word Pnika comes from...
So there we get a view of their political meeting spot.
Whenever the Athenians had an issue, a problem, they wanted to...
As well as the market off to the right.
The Athenian assembly was known as the Ecclesia. It met at the Pnyx 40 times a year to discuss various civic matters, and each session usually lasted a few hours. The word Pnyx is believed to mean something close to packed together. This was probably a reference to the fact that during meetings of the Ecclesia, the location would be filled to its capacity, with citizens packed in practically shoulder to shoulder. All male citizens were allowed to directly participate in the democratic process. Those over 20 years old had the right to speak and vote, while those over 30 could be elected to the higher position of magistrate. In total, there were approximately 30,000 citizens in Athens in the classical period. To draft and adopt decrees, 6,000 of them had to attend the meeting. Citizens came from all over Attica's 10 districts to attend the meetings of the Ecclesia. The meeting was presided over by an executive council called the Prytanes. Every session began with a sacrifice to Zeus Agoreos, the patron of the assembly. During the meeting, citizens delivered speeches from the Pnyx's platform on whatever issues the city faced. Afterwards, the issue was voted on with a show of hands from the gathered assembly. The Ecclesia made important decisions about subjects like grain importation, expenses, and declarations of war. While they could not directly enact laws, they had a say in appointing Athens' legislators, which gave them a large role in shaping the city's daily operations. While some citizens only participated in the sessions of the Ecclesia, others could become more involved in democracy as magistrates. Magistrates were elected from among Athenian citizens over 30. They were often successful orators and charismatic politicians, and they held much more sway over important decisions than the average citizen. One of the most famous magistrates was Pericles, who was so popular he held his position for 15 years. In theory, every Athenian citizen over the age of 20 had the right to participate in the assembly. However, some of them lived far from the city, and others could not financially afford to miss a day of work to attend meetings. For these reasons, the city introduced a special allowance called a misthos ecclesiasticos in the 4th century BCE, meant to encourage participation. Originally, it was 2 obols, but the politician Cleon raised it to 3. Athens introduced several innovations that heavily influenced modern society, including theater, architecture, and philosophy. However, Their greatest contribution was their democratic government, which introduced the concept of a city ruled by its citizens. The decision to adopt democracy as a government, a choice made in 508 BCE, shaped civilization as we know it and continues to affect us today. The Acropolis has gone through many changes in its long history. It began as a simple rock, was settled as early as the Neolithic period, and then became a fortress in the Mycenaean period. Stone buildings started appearing in the 7th century BCE. But the famous structures whose ruins remain visible today date mainly from a period of construction in the 5th century BCE. The location of the Acropolis is closely tied with Athens' foundation myth. Supposedly, it was the site where Athena and Poseidon competed for the city's patronage. This connection gave the Acropolis a sacred aura, and it was considered the religious heart of the city.
That is what it looks like today. My view is not as spectacular because the horrible fires fogged out so you could not even see the ocean from where we were. Truly sad. This right here is where I am currently standing in the video, as you saw before, with this little view right here. Not exactly the most accurate depiction, I don't think. Yes. Right here is the main entrance gate that I walked through. You walk through here, and we come out to this area here, which is where the Parthenon is on our right, and the Temple of Athena is off to the left.
The Temple of Athena Nike was built on the remains of old fortifications from the Mycenaean era. Worship at the temple can be traced back to the 6th century BCE, but the building itself was destroyed during the Greco-Persian Wars a century later. It was rebuilt during the Peloponnesian War. Given that the name Athena Nike roughly means Athena of victory, it was likely constructed in the hopes that Athens would win the war. Unusually, the temple depicts historical scenes of battles against the Persians instead of the more mythologically inclined art of other Greek buildings. The temple's priestess was chosen randomly among the Athenians and received a salary of 50 drachmae annually, along with skins and trophies from sacrificed animals.
The sculptures and artwork on the roofs of the building, most cases it'll be mythological stuff like the gods, because you only sculpt the gods. It's not something that you're supposed to show yourself. But in this occasion, the Parthenon dons sculptures telling stories of the Athenians doing their processions to the Parthenon for their festivals, where once a year the doors would be open and people would bring their offerings inside. It's kind of a rare patriotic display of, yes, look, this is us doing something. It's not a story about the gods. This is us. This is Athenians. This is what we do. It's kind of a rare thing to see.
The Acropolis was built up over a long period, due in no small part to its partial destruction during the Greco-Persian Wars. It was in the 5th century BCE, though, that the Acropolis received its most significant improvements. This period was an extremely prosperous time for Athens, both financially and culturally. With a booming economy bolstered by trade and the Lavrion silver mines, Pericles, the leader of Athens, financed a huge project to rebuild the citadel. He enlisted the help of renowned artists, like the sculptor Phidias, as well as the architects Iktinos and Callicrates. Together, they erected buildings like the Parthenon and the Propylaea Gateway. Pericles' goal was to make the Acropolis into a glorious monument to the gods and to mortal Athenians. Behind the Propylaea was the giant bronze statue of Athena Promachos, or Athena who fights on the front lines. That name was reflected in the spear and shield the statue held in its hands. It was erected in the mid-5th century BCE by the artist Phidias. According to an inscription, It took 9 years to make and cost almost 500,000 drachmae. At approximately 10 meters tall, the statue was apparently so large that Pausanias claimed its helmet and spear tip could be seen from the sea near Cape Sunion, 60 kilometers away. The ornamentation on the statue's shield was engraved by the metalsmith Mies.
There was really nothing left of the statue today, as you'll see in my walkthrough. There's nothing like this here. But you will see that I did come up. I came up through the gates.
The Aerophoroi were young girls between the ages of 7 and 11 who were in charge of special rites. A list of 4 girls was drafted by the Assembly of Citizens, from which the High Magistrate, the Archon Basileus, chose 2 to serve as Aerophoroi for the year. The girls lived in a house on the Acropolis. They were in charge of carrying sacred objects and weaving the peplos of Athena. The peplos was a sacred robe offered to Athena during Panathenaea, a festival held in her honor. The Erechtheion was an atypical temple. It was dedicated not only to Athena Polias, but also to Cecrops, the mythical founder of Athens, his son Erechtheos, and even Poseidon, the sea god who challenged Athena for possession of the city. The temple was divided into sections. The eastern part housed a statue dedicated to Athena, while the western section jointly belonged to Poseidon and Erechtheos. Meanwhile, King Cecrops' grave was believed to be under the caryatid porch. Under the temple was a crypt that was said to contain the sacred snakes of Athena. The snakes may have had a sweet tooth because the priestesses of Athena allegedly fed them honey cakes.
And I took a picture standing right here. Right here's where I was standing. And it's pretty sick.
The Parthenon is one of the most well-known buildings in the world and an enduring symbol of ancient Greek civilization. While it is located on the Acropolis, the building is not a traditional temple. It was built by the sculptor Phidias and the architects Callicrates and Ictinus as a great monument to the glory of the city of Athens. That glory is evident in its many carvings. One of the most carved monuments in Greek architecture, the Parthenon's decorations depict several mythological scenes. These include the birth of Athena, her fight against Poseidon for the patronage of Athens, the gods' battle with the giants, and the procession of the great Panathenaea. The Parthenon's inner chamber, or cella, contained a massive statue of Athena that was considered to be one of the sculptor Phidias's greatest masterpieces. The statue was chryselephantine, a combination of gold and ivory. To justify the steep cost of its construction, Pericles told Athenians that the statue was a gold reserve, which could be disassembled in times of economic distress. The cella also allegedly contained a pool, whose main purpose was to control the room's humidity, which helped preserve the statue's ivory.
I'm sure you guys can also hear I turned the volume way down because of how unbelievably windy it is up there. You would just hear your ears being blown out by wind. You got their little Greek flag overlooking the city. And over here is the side of the Acropolis, looking down towards where the theaters would be. And you can really see how enormous this city is, guys. I mean, just look at that. It's like, I think they said well over 50% of the population lives in Athens. Probably up towards 80. Real life.
Athens' treasury was located in the Parthenon, where it was believed to be protected by Athena herself. The treasury contained objects of great value, acquired from different conquests, as well as a mass of minted silver coins and various offerings to Athena. Pericles also decided to move the entirety of the Delian League's treasure to the Parthenon in 454 BCE. This was a great testament to Athens' power over the rest of Greece. The riches were divided into 2 parts, the Demosia, which belonged to the city, and the Hiera Cremata, which was dedicated to the goddess and only used for religious purposes.
And here you can see I'm using the little eagle flyby to do a little aerial view of what it would look like back then. Down here is the theater or opera house, whatever you want to call it, where they would do performances, plays. I don't know if they did musicals, I can't really remember, but stuff like that. And I'm going to show you that in real life real quick right here. Here is us leaving the Acropolis as well through those gates that we entered, and I showed you in the game as well. This is us on our way out. This is just a cool little old house I saw in Athens by our hotel.
And our destination for tonight is Nafplio. This is where we are going to overnight at Nafplio. So, first stop at the Canal of Corinth.
We are now leaving Athens, as she said, heading for Nafplio. I think I said that right, but you heard her say it. And that was a 2-night stay, but as you can see, the fires are still raging very heavily, and we're not showing signs of stopping anytime soon.
The fire didn't stop there. The aircrafts that have been dropping water over the fires have only about another hour to go to be able to operate safely to try to put out those flames. But the heat is so high over the fires that the water has been evaporating before it's been hitting the ground. So the helicopters have been flying lower and lower to try to get to the fires, to try to get as close as possible to put out these flames.
It was very emotional. The tour guide did tell us that her country was hurting from these fires.
By nightfall, reports confirmed the worst. The fire had jumped the highway, spreading to both sides of the national road. The wildfires seem to be everywhere. Everything at the moment seems uncertain.